meeting. KTN News.
All right, it's now 14 minutes after 7 and time for us to review the week that has been. And I'll start first of all by introducing the guests that we have here this morning. I'll start with the lady, and that's Dr. Kitiabi, who is a public sector analyst. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too. We also have Dr. Lutalala Muhwana, who is an advocate. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Asante sana,
and Happy
Michael.
New Year to you too.
Asante sana, Michael. Heri mwaka mpya.
Asante. Last but not least, we have Kevin Osido, who is also a governance consultant. Good to have you, sir, and Happy New Year to you too.
To you too, sir. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Great.
All right, straight into the week that we'd like to review. And I know for many Kenyans would probably start, let's start with the basic commodities. With the government subsidy expiring on the 31st of December, we already have unga from 90 shillings to 160 in some places, which is of concern. I've also seen on the dailies today that with Kenya Power, they need to recover 10.1 billion Kenyan shillings, which they probably are going to pass on to the consumer to recover that money. But generally speaking, what we're looking at is the economy and the kind of year that we should expect. Let me start with you, Dr. Kitiabi, on just a very rough start for Kenya, it seems.
Indeed, a very rough start. I don't know, Kitonga, sometimes it is hard to believe what goes on. I mean, what is the point of a subsidy? What is really the point of a subsidy? This is economics of first year in the university. So you cannot have a subsidy that is only for elections. Yeah, you cannot. It means the government does not have a policy on how to bring down the price of
Plainly put, was this a campaign strategy, do you think?
It is not even a campaign strategy. It was so obvious that they were doing it because they wanted votes. And now they cannot sustain it. Because every subsidy has to have a very strong policy behind it. And it has to be driven by the market also, so that you have several infrastructural activities that you put in place for you to maintain that subsidy.
Okay. Dr. Muhwana, do you agree that it was purely, a campaign strategy of sorts? But also, what solutions would we be looking at? Because it might be easy to sit here and critique and say, it doesn't really meet the basic standards, but what is it that possibly should be in place? We seem to be dealing with a problem from the top rather than the bottom.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. My sister Regina is a figures person, and when she speaks, I listen a lot. I would want to believe it was not a campaign strategy, but in the face of what has just happened, what was it? That's what I'll struggle to find out. Because if you remember at the time when the maize subsidy came in, we were at that time of the electioneering period, and there was an outcry about the price of unga. And that is the time when they put this subsidy. You see, a subsidy in layman's terms, I'm not an economist, but in layman's terms means that whereas the ordinary price of a packet of unga would cost 180, for instance, like it's now set to cost, they are only giving at 90 to the mwananchi, but the difference, somebody else...
Take care of the difference.
Thank you. Somebody else is footing for it. Now, first of all, we know that this subsidy came at a time way after the budget was read. So where was this provision made from? Number one. And that's the whole issue that my sister Regina here raises. What was the sustainability of that subsidy? So whereas it is a good thing that the government would come in as it did to offer this subsidy, the important thing is that were the fundamentals in place? And for us who may not be necessarily professors of economics, the easiest answer would be that they were not. Because why is the abandonment at this time? If you look at it, Michael, January is the most, from January, February, March, is the most difficult year for many Kenyans because the demand for school fees for our children and the cost having come from festivities is normally very high. So if there was any sensitivity as to whether the citizens should be comfortable, it is this time.
This is when it's required.
Precisely. Yeah. So why will the subsidy come to an end and you're being told it's going to 180? That is why then the temptation to say that the purpose for which the subsidy was brought has since lapsed. And what purpose could it be? because you have to deal within the context, then it will be forgiven for those who will say it was an electioneering gimmick. Going forward, however, we need to understand that the fundamentals of food price increases in this country have never been dealt with. For the longest time, people have questioned why maize production, or put it more generally, agricultural production in this country, which is the mainstay of this country, has never been given importance. Particularly the issue of fertilizers. There was a time when they said there would be a fertilizer factory coming up in Eldoret, some times back. I have no idea how far that has gone. What happens to the subsidy? For me, the subsidy would rather come when it comes to inputs, fertilizers, farming implements. Generally, the policies regarding agriculture in this country have to be worked on, together with the areas that are not arable by the fact that they are dry. You remember the Gulana project, where the maize, there was another issue about maize. The part of this country that can produce food, but is not producing because of harsh climatic conditions, and yet we know that in Israel and many other countries, the dryness that we have in a part of the country is nothing. We can still have that part of the country being productive. So, Michael, to make it brief, the government needs to go back to the basics of food production. This subsidy is not workable in the long run, and is a subsidy in the wrong place. Let the subsidy be in the inputs, and the food will be on our tables.
All right, Kevin, let me come to you. And to be fair, this is not a problem that can be dealt with overnight. Even the subsidy was purely a very short-term process. Even if it continued till March, at some point it would have to be dealt with. We need to deal with food security long-term basis because we have an increase in population. Our arable land is also decreasing by virtue of the fact that we are subdividing, and even the numbers that are increasing. Do we seem to have a leadership? And this is not just Jubilee, but generally, do we seem to have a leadership that is visionary enough to give us sustainability in the long term?
Thank you, Mike. And straight to your question, in my view, the government must be in a position to separate the politics from practice, and that has to be guided by a very clear policy. And you note that right now we have 2 tiers of government, and agriculture. A bigger chunk of agricultural activities for Kenya are actually devolved as per Schedule 4 functions of counties, of course, of both the national and county governments. The government for a long time has failed, in my view, to invest in agriculture. And in fact, just a few days ago, while the president launched his 4-point strategy, he also indicated, and the economists who also include the Africa Development Bank, the World Bank, and part of work that County Governance Watch, where I serve, has been able to do with several counties, indicate that the next frontier for economic development and sustainability is actually food security and agriculture. Now, the government, therefore, needs to invest very heavily in agriculture. In fact, the 2 sectors that are to spur Kenya to the next level include agriculture and manufacturing. But insofar as the narrative and the rhetoric is concerned, we've done too much of the talking, but we cannot be able to feel the action. And that action, therefore, is being felt by the common citizen. And in my view, it is a failure of government to invest. So for us to be able to answer to this question, the government must be deliberate in not only bringing out policies that, in my view, also need to even look at reviewing all these departments and agencies that are within the Ministry of Agriculture, because, Michael, there are so many. There are over, I think, 63 or so of them. There is no way we can be able to have priorities set effectively and also provide space for people who are supposed to deliver these services effectively if we are going to keep discussing and sitting in boardrooms asking who is going to do what, when, and how. The government, therefore, in my view, needs to invest very heavily and allow county governments also to be able to do their work. And that includes the ability to provide funding for agricultural service delivery at the county level, so that then counties are also given that space. They are given the resources that they need, so that as they do it at the county level, the national government will be able to provide policies that are harmonized and policies that will be able to guide all these processes, so that we see national engaging with counties, and so counties being able to deliver those services to the people. Otherwise, I think we've done too much of the talking And it is now time to go to the root of this matter. Why are Kenyans asking for unga or ugali 54 plus years after independence? Note that our founding fathers said we are going to deal with 3 enemies, and one of those major enemies was actually hunger. What hasn't we done rightly? All right, Dr. Kitiabi, from the days of freedom from hunger walk, which didn't seem to deal with anything so far, but now we have county governments, and Osido makes a valid point that this as a devolved a part of government. What is the role of the county government in ensuring that we have food security in this country?
I think, first of all, Kitonga, let's go back to the subsidy. I mean, all these issues about us not investing in the agriculture sector does not explain the reason why the government put up that subsidy and the reason why they withdrew it. And the fact doesn't change that the reason you usually have a subsidy is because of inflation. Yeah? Inflation is so high, so you're trying to balance between bringing down inflation. So you go and subsidize commodities that, like unga, which are a staple food. A staple food. Yeah.
But so a subsidy by nature is a very temporary cause of action.
It's it doesn't have to be temporary. It doesn't have to be temporary, especially if we are talking about unga. And I think that's what he's alluding to, that it doesn't have to be temporary. What is it? If you can't invest in agriculture for you to reduce the price of producing maize, then you must find money to pay for that, you know, that price, that difference. And the person is the government. It's not anybody else. And you know, subsidies are around the world. You know, sometimes you do subsidies also to encourage people to do something. Let's say, for example, in the US, they don't eat yellow maize. But they subsidize farmers to grow yellow maize because of the developmental value and you know, the ambassadorial value that it has. It gives America a name around the world. So we are the ones who, when we are short of food, they give us that maize. The Americans themselves don't eat it. But if you look at the way they have sustained not just yellow maize, but maize in general in the United States, is to subsidize the farmers to be able to produce at a price that the farmers can afford to do so. And that's what Dr. Altarala is referring to when he says that you must then subsidize the inputs. Yeah? And it is not a lack of policy. In fact, if you look at I used to work in the region on trade and agriculture. And if you look at the policies around the region, and I can even say around Africa, Kenya has the best policies in agriculture. The problem is implementation. And now I come back to your point now of counties. Right. Implementation. When this subsidy was called, who did we see on TV? I don't know. Who did we see? Was there any county?
National leadership.
Yes. So agriculture is devolved. And that is the problem we talked about last time when I was here. That the problem is we have the wrong people doing the right things. When we are doing devolution, what happened is that the government devolved things on paper. Yeah, but in reality, agriculture has not been devolved.
Has not been devolved. All right, I want us to take a short break, but before that, Dr. Mkhwana, question here being, what should Kenyans expect? Because at the end of the day, we might be sitting here, or Kenyans might be sitting with bated breath, hoping that there's going to be a solution found in the near future, which may not be practical. What is it that we should expect? Should we just anticipate that at unga at 180 shillings is possibly going to be what we should expect for the next 6 months? Next 1 year?
Frankly, Michael, I don't know what to expect.
Then it seems that we are in big trouble.
Because
we should be working with some expectation of some kind, because then how do we hold those who are in office accountable? What is it that we should expect for them to deliver?
You know, Michael, the reason why I'm saying I don't know what to expect is I make a reflection, a very quick reflection to the advent of the current government in power. And they had wonderful promises, wonderful promises. Particularly agriculture. And I remember when Willie Bett came in as the CS for agriculture, They had a wonderful master plan. And I agree with my sister here that we have very good policies. The problem, Michael, is that in this country, every pronouncement is laced with politics and political interests. I chose to be polite today, not to appear like I'm criticizing politicians because they say I'm always against politicians. But look, every government pronouncement, even that which ought to be left to pure professionals like my sister here, are laced with politics. And the moment politics come in, then bipartisan stands come up, and the implementation becomes a tall order. Devolution in this country is the greatest idea that ever came. Unfortunately, and I agree with her, that there is no willingness to devolve everything. Again, why? Because some of these functions that have been devolved have huge ramifications on the political interests of some of our leaders. And therefore, they are not willing to let go. Health, another minefield. Yeah. They are not willing to let go. Even so, Michael, thank you. So I have no idea what to expect. But what I know, having lived in this country through all those regimes, I can only foresee the hard times that we are used to.
Oh dear. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, let's tackle that big beast, which is also education, which has been on the limelight. And of course, there's a change of curriculum and how that is being handled. It's now